I believe that that's part of it. You know, what it means is that if you know that calamity is coming, then you take precautions. A wise man doesn't just say, okay, it's coming and I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to hide my head in the sand. I'm going to do something. And so I'll put it this way. And first, the mega picture or the meta picture, and this goes with a harbinger, also is there's a pattern that this phenomenon, the Shemitah and more, that if a nation has been so blessed and so and absolutely blessed by God turns away from this, what happens is the blessings are removed from that nation, and it's the signs of judgment, and all these signs of judgment. One of the things about the harbinger is that what it's saying is that there are specific signs of judgment, 9 signs that appeared in the last days of ancient Israel that are now reappearing on American soil. So all and in precision, some of them involve the president and leaders, but they're happening in precision. So and since the book came out, the harbinger, they've continued to manifest. So this all comes, the Shemitah, the harbinger, all come together. What is the first thing is to give a few different levels of preparation. The first thing is that, and I'll say this outright, that if you are listening to this and you're not right with God, get your life right, because that's what these things. America is rapidly accelerating in a moral collapse and a spiritual collapse. I mean, that's part of the picture. And so you've got that. I mean, the economic follows that. So we've got that. And so the point is that get your life right with God. And I'll also say that I'm a minister. If you're not born again, get born again. Doesn't matter what your religion is. Number 2, the Bible also says that, as you said, a prudent man prepares. Well, what do? I'm not a financial advisor, but I'll speak for myself. I believe that in this time period, first of all, if you have anything linked to the stock market, I mean, unless you have some supernatural knowledge or some amazing knowledge that there's some way, in general, I would not be putting my stock in the stock market, number 1. Or have things that you have attached to it. A lot of people don't realize that their pensions may be attached to the stock market. Number 2, I also believe that we should have essentials, meaning that it is a wise thing, we're talking about a prudent man, a wise thing to have essentials in store, that if there is a collapse, and if there is the collapse not only of the markets, but of infrastructure, of services, if these things should break down, that you would be okay for a time period. And so, and the worst case scenario is there's no worst case scenario, and you've got stuff that you can use anyway. So I believe it is wise. I'm not a survivalist, I'm more of a revivalist. But the point is, I do believe that we should be wise in all things. The key here in practical terms is safety. Safety. That's the key. I would not go with things that are risky, but safety. I would not put my trust in a house of cards.
I tell people all the time on my site, I said, listen, go out and buy food and water. It's cheap insurance. If you don't use it, if you don't have to use it, you can always just use it up, or It's not that much money. Now, you buy car insurance and you pay $500 every 6 months, and at the end of every 6 months you say, oh, I didn't have a wreck. Yeah. Oh, I got to go out and buy some more insurance.
Exactly.
I mean, $500. You spend. Some people say, well, I get this question a lot too about poor people, about people not very poor. I tell them, do you have a data package? Good, get rid of it. Do you have cable TV? Yeah, cut it off. Do you have a car? Start riding a bike. Take all that money and divert it into buying food and water. Am I telling them wrong?
No, I don't believe you are, and it's exactly what you said. I mean, we spend $10,000, $12,000 on health insurance. If anything goes wrong, exactly what you say. We don't complain if we don't get sick. But the point is, and this is much less than that, but these are basics for life. I mean, we should have this anyway, I believe. This is basic to stay alive. And the thing is that, if we're saying that always these things are always going to work perfectly, I don't believe they're always going to work perfectly. I believe, again, we are at the verge of collapse, and you need to have, I believe, enough just to get through that time, not in fear, but the most important thing is get right spiritually. Secondly, then be a wise man or woman and do what is wise in view of such things, which I believe you should have anyway.
One of the things in your book that you said to me, you said the number one question after doing this book is that people ask you about America's future. Because, you live in America. I have USA Watchdogs, American site. And America is so critical in the world, with the world's reserve currency. What do you tell people when they say, what's going to happen, Rabbi Cahn, Pastor Cahn, what's going to happen to America? What do you tell people?
That's a great question. Well, one of the mysteries of the Shemitah, it's not only the financial realm and the economic realm, but this mystery actually pinpoints changes in world history, and even there's a whole section called the Rise and Fall of Nations, and you can look at the history of modern history and see when the Shemitah comes At key times comes world change, comes global cataclysm, comes World War I, comes World War II, comes the Cold War, comes the rise of the collapse of nations. You know, the word Shemitah in Hebrew can also mean collapse, literally, and can mean the fall. And so we watch, actually, America's rise has been timed to the Shemitah. And so the thing is that, you know, during a Shemitah year, something major can happen. Now, I'll give you an example of something that already happened that most people missed. I mean, you probably didn't miss it, but most people did. And that is that within 2 weeks of the Shemitah, 2 weeks, the American age, which began in 1871, which is when America became the strongest economic power on earth, and this has lasted ever since then, over 140 years, that age came to an end. China surpassed America for the first time in more than the 20th century. So that's I believe that's a foreshadow or a warning of where things can go. The mystery of the Shemitah with Israel, it actually, when Israel totally rejected God, totally turned away from its foundation, it actually was destroyed. So what I'm saying is this. One of the things about, for instance, Bible prophecy is that when you look at the end time prophecies, you don't see America as prominent. So it means that somehow there's going to be a change from America being the head of nations to something. I've warned about this for a long time. Well, I believe this. I believe that if we don't get back, if America does not return to its foundations and in God, that the American age entirely will come to an end. We will not be the head of nations in any way, and we will go through very hard times. And so I believe that and that's actually kind of a law of the Bible. It's also where the harbingers are all converging, and it's also what the Shemitah is saying. So that is the warning. The warning of collapse is not just economic or financial, but it is also something even much greater. So I believe we can even see the beginning of a turn of history, and I believe we're already seeing it. So I believe that, the days of, I'll put it this way. You cannot mock God. You cannot defy him and mock the one who's the source of your blessings and expect those blessings to continue. That on the very first day of America's existence as a fully formed nation, the first president, George Washington, when he's sworn in the capital city, he gives a prophetic warning. And basically what he says, and this is recorded in the Harbinger, but what he says is that basically if we ever turn away from God and the ways of our foundation, the ways of God, that the blessings will be removed from the land. Well, I believe we are watching that now. And the place where he said that, the first capital of America, wasn't Washington, it was New York City. And then he went with the entire first government on the first day, and they prayed, and the first act was to pray and dedicate America to God. That's America's consecration ground. Well, where was it? America was dedicated to God and was consecrated to God on what we now know as Ground Zero. There's an ancient mystery. That's where it was dedicated. That the warning, that was a sign. 9/11 was a warning and a sign of America, return to your foundation or your blessings are going to be removed.
Do you think America survives in some shape? Do we think we can be revived?
I believe that we survive, but I believe things are going to change. And as far as revive, that's a great question. Here's my hope. I mean, I always have hope, but the thing is that if I looked at the situation where we're going rapidly, I would not have a lot of hope. But when I look at God, I have hope. The thing is this: people say, well, if there's going to be a great shaking, and I believe again, regardless of the time, I believe we're going to watch an economic collapse, a financial collapse, and even more than that. But the thing is that regardless of when it happens, I believe people say, well, that's scary. I believe it's the opposite. I believe without a shaking, there'd be no hope for America. The Bible says that God uses all things, and so the point of a shaking the very point is to bring back. And we have grown so deaf to morality, to the voice of God, that I believe it only will come in shouting. And you remember, Greg, 9/11, what happened is there was a shaking. People flocked to houses of worship, flocked to church. It looked like there was going to be a revival, a renewal, but there wasn't. After 3 weeks, it was over because there was no turn, there was no change, there was no repentance. Without that, there can't be. So I believe one of the reasons why I was called to write the Harbinger and write also the Shemitah is that it happened to be for the fact, so when these things do happen, that the dots are connected, because the will of God is renewal. So I believe you can have both. They say it's going to be judgment and revival. I believe you can have both, that even so that revival and renewal can actually come through shaking.
Do you think we get a big fat war in the Middle East with this ISIS? I mean, they're doing dreadful things. They're cutting off the heads of Christians. They took them down to the water, I guess, so they wouldn't have much of a mess to clean up. And they cut off 21 Christians' heads. I mean, it's outrageous. Do you think we're going to end up in a big nuclear war?
That's a great question. Well, there's two things that most people don't realize about this with the Middle East. One, and this goes back to the first thing is this pattern of a very specific pattern of warning and judgment. In the harbinger, the second harbinger of the 9 harbingers that appeared in ancient Israel is the harbinger of the terrorist, and that is that the first warning was a strike on the land that was done by terrorists. Literally, the Assyrians who did this in ancient Israel were the fathers of terrorism. They invented it. And the thing is, ISIS is like a descendant of that. And the thing is that, but the pattern is, first comes this strike on the land, it's limited, it's a wake-up call. But then as the nation does, if the nation doesn't turn back, after a number of years, this happened with ancient Israel, it gets re-engaged with the terrorists, and now comes an even greater calamity. Well, so I was always watching since the harbinger, is America going to get re-engaged with another form of, or with a terrorist, with the same thing, because that's the pattern. Well, ISIS, amazingly, ISIS comes from the same exact spot that the ancient Assyrians do. This is the beginning of the harbinger pattern. They actually claim Syria and Iraq, which is ancient Assyria, the same people that brought judgment to ancient Israel. This launches the harbinger sequence. That's number one. Number two, the ancient Assyrians were known for being bloodthirsty. They mutilated people, and that's exactly what ISIS does. And the ancient Assyrians were especially known for beheading their victims and then putting them on display. And that's exactly what ISIS does. ISIS is like the reincarnation of ancient Assyria. So I believe this is ominous. And not only that, they took over Mosul, which is the capital of ancient Assyria. They now have the capital of this. So it's kind of like a replay. And when the president first announced that we're gonna have war with ISIS a little while back, it's actually just before the Shemitah began. It was the eve of 9/11, which is, I believe, is another ominous thing. So I've always been waiting to see if this is going to happen. Well, ISIS is like the return of the terrorists. So I believe this is an ominous sign, and this can lead. I mean, they are evil, and they should be they should be stopped in whatever the case is. But to engage in all these things with America, while America is also heading rapidly away from God, is not a good formula. It's not a good combination. So I believe this is ominous. And the other thing, Greg, is there's a mystery that I put at the end of the book, the mystery of the Shemitah, which is called the mystery of the 7th Shemitah, which is going to link up with the Middle East. And that is this. Every 7 years is the Shemitah, but every 7th Shemitah is a super Shemitah. 49 years ushers in the 50th year, which is called the Jubilee. And in the Jubilee, what happens, interesting, is that there is a restoration. If you lost your land, you get restored. If you lost your father's home, you get restored to your inheritance. It says everyone shall return home and they'll receive back their inheritance. Well, there's an amazing thing about end time prophecy. It says that these things can't happen until Israel, Middle East, Israel comes back to the land. The Jewish people come back to the land, or you cannot have end time prophecy. Well, the amazing thing is this mystery of the 7th Shemitah actually gives the exact time when these things have to happen. For instance, 1917 was the year of the Shemitah. In that time period, Israel is restored to the land. The British Empire gets Israel from the Turkish Empire, gives it to Israel, says return home. It's the restoration returning home. Well, if you count 70 or 7 sevens to the next 50th year or Jubilee restoration, the mystery of the Shemitah brings you to the year 1967. 1967, Israeli soldiers enter Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is restored. They come back to their ancient possession of Jerusalem, which is, still the controversy of the news. Well, the interesting thing, Greg, is that if you follow this mystery, and I'm not again saying it has to always continue, but the question is, when's the next 7th Shemitah? It is right now, 2015, and the period that would indicate, if something's going to happen, that there could be a major event in the Middle East, major war, but that results in something prophetic, is the period of September 2015 to September 2016. I'm not dogmatic, but I believe we should be aware of it. That's why, again, for the first time I put in dates. So all these things, again, are converging.
Jonathan Cahn, tell people how to get your books. And I got to tell you, you just were nice enough to do an interview, and I don't have to, put a link up, but I'm going to. But this is kind of a 1-2 punch. I mean, the Mystery of the Shemitah and the Harbinger, I don't see how you can have one without the other. How do people get your books? Your Hope of the World is your ministry, is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. The Mystery of the Shemitah and the Harbinger are available everywhere, from online, offline, Amazon, Walmart, every place you can imagine. You can get it right now, as well as the Harbinger. They're both available really everywhere, online and offline. If the people want to get in touch, the ministry, and this is where all the kind of prophetic updates or end time updates and also free gifts is called Hope of the World. And all you have to do is remember that, Hope of the World, and put a .org. It's hopeoftheworld.org, and you can get in touch, and we'll send you a lot of great stuff. So we're glad to do that.
I got to tell you, I don't see how you can have one without the other. I mean, you even reference stuff in this to this to this. So great stuff. I hope you come back. I hope I can book you again. Please tell me. I mean, we just scratched the surface. Please tell me you'll come back, right?
Yeah, I will, Greg. It was great to be with you. I had no idea of what it would be like, and it's very professional, and you're very on target, and we're on the same page. And I believe you're also, in a different way, you're also sounding the trumpet.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it. Jonathan Cahn, the best-selling author of The Harbinger, his latest book, The Mystery of the Shemitah. Thank you so much for joining us today on USA Watchdog.
Thank you, Greg. Keep up the good work.